Hello and welcome back to the Bookshelf Odyssey podcast and our deep dive into Great Expectations by Charles Dickens. And we're getting so close to the end now, and we're going to cover chapters 54 through 56 of this classic work. Many of the plot lines are beginning to get wrapped up, and we're beginning to see the end of some of the characters' plot lines. This is going to be really part one of the ending. I wanted to do the rest of it all in one go, but I'm afraid of the length of the video. It might be a lot to take in all at once. So I'm just going to break it up over this week, and we'll get chapters 54 through 56 today, and then on Saturday will be the rest of the book, 57 through 59. And then I'll have some final thoughts on the book. So if you are ready, grab your copy of Great Expectations, and let's dive in to Dickens. Chapter 54 begins with one of my favorite quotes by Dickens about the weather. And yes, I have a list. It says, begins in chapter 54. It was one of those March days when the sun shines hot and the wind blows cold, when it is summer in the light and winter in the shade. And I love that quote because every time in March or April, even here in Iowa, where the weather is like that, it's very accurate, very descriptive, and I think about that quote all the time when I'm outside in those early spring days where the sun is warm but the wind is cold, and I don't know, just the way Dickens describes it. That's one of my favorite quotes of his, especially regarding the weather. But okay, we pick up on our plot where we left off, and that is they are Herbert and Pip and Startop are trying to rescue Magwitch. And after Pip's Mission Impossible team pick up Magwitch, they continue to paddle down the river while Magwitch talks about freedom. And then along the way, they stop for food. And it feels like, they said, at this dismal time, we were evidently all possessed by the idea, or that we were followed. And I like that it's no longer just Pip's paranoia talking, that everyone feels like they're being followed. And as they stopped the night for some food, one of the employees there were talking about how they saw something weird out on the water in another boat that seemed to have been following them. And the next day they find out that they are indeed being followed, and Magwitch fears that it is Compeyson who is following them. As they are approached by this boat, a man calls out that he is here to apprehend a man named Abel Magwitch, otherwise Provis, and he says, I apprehend that man and call upon him to surrender and you to assist. And so then the chase is on. Compeyson catches up. He and Magwitch begin to fight. And we get that repeating line again that Dickens likes to employ at times. He says, still in the same moment, I saw the prisoner start up, lean across his captor, and pull the cloak from the neck of the shrinking sitter in the galley. Still in the same moment, I saw that the face disclosed was the face of the other convict of long ago. Still in the same moment, I saw and heard a great cry on board the steamer and a loud splash in the water, and felt the boat sink from under me. So yeah, they fight, and Dickens uses that phrase 3 times again, still in the same moment, still in the same moment. And it brings up that, it's really catching your attention and bringing your focus to the scene that something is about to happen. It helps to build the dread, I think. And so Magwitch and Compeyson go under, and Compeyson is not found yet, but they're able to pull Magwitch out. It says, here I was able to get some comforts for Magwitch, Provis no longer, who had received some very severe injury in the chest and a deep cut in the head. And he believed that the steamer had run him over and injured his chest. I find it interesting that he is now referring to Magwitch no longer as Provis, and he makes that very clear, that identity has been compromised, and so Magwitch is known for who he truly is. So the police catch them, and Magwitch is placed under arrest even though he is injured. And Pip swears that he will remain by Magwitch's side. He comforts Magwitch in his time of need. He says, for now my repugnance to him had all melted away, and in the hunted, wounded, shackled creature who held my hand in his, I only saw a man who had meant to be my benefactor, and who had felt affectionately gratefully and generously towards me with great constancy through a series of years. I only saw in him a much better man than I had been to Joe. What a profound statement that is, that Pip is no longer embarrassed by this convict. He's no longer ashamed of him or afraid of him, and perhaps sees him for who he truly is. A man who felt affection, gratefulness, and generosity towards Pip for whatever reason, because Pip, years ago, showed him a mild kindness. Now Magwitch had fond feelings for Pip and did everything to be Pip's benefactor. And we see in the rest of the description there that Magwitch is suffering physically quite awfully. And Magwitch, as he's arrested and he's going to be on trial, and he asks Pip, says, "I will never stir from your side," said I, "when I am suffered to be near you. Please God, I will be as true to you as you have been to me." I felt his hand tremble as it held mine, and he turned his face away as he lay in the bottom of the boat. And I heard that old sound in his throat, softened now, like all the rest of him. It was a good thing that he had touched this point, for it put into my mind what I might not otherwise have thought of until too late, that he need never know how his hopes of enriching me. As a criminal, I think from what the book says or what I've read, that the money would just go to the government. Pip is offering something much more valuable than money, and that is friendship and companionship. He's going to stay with him through it all, through the trial, through everything. And I'm kind of picking up on a theme again here. A lot of characters are being broken, remade in that sense. We really saw that with Miss Havisham. She was broken, but in the end, she was burned, and I think has become a somewhat better person in all of this. And we'll see some more of that kind of play out in the rest of the book. Pip is in the process of being broken and remade into a better person. Magwitch, I think, here is broken and he's being remade, or at least our perception of him is changing at the very least. That he just had a rotten deal given. And you remember all of Magwitch's backstory and how essentially he was condemned and arrested and put in prison because he looked the part. He met society's expectations of what a criminal should look like, so they punished him and let Compeyson go off lighter because he looked more like a gentleman. And that has so much ramifications of what our culture is dealing with today. And that's going to be a theme that we're even going to see play out in the closing chapters, but I won't say anything right now in case you haven't read them yet. So we'll put a pin in that. But this ends part 33. It was just one chapter, a longer one, but that really is beginning to wrap up the story of Magwitch. So let's go ahead and jump to chapters 55 and 56. And we find that Jaggers is going to help defend Magwitch and be his lawyer. And Pip, he says, "I imparted to Mr. Jaggers my design of keeping him in ignorance of the fate of his wealth." And Jaggers is upset that Pip lost the money, let it slip through his fingers. But what was he supposed to do here? I think Pip's now at this part in his life where he doesn't care so much about the money, and he's caring more about people and about being a good man, which is a distinct change that we've seen in his character. Herbert tells Pip that his job is sending him east. He says, "We shall lose a fine opportunity if I put off going to Cairo, and I am very much afraid I must go, Handel, when you most need me." So Herbert continuing to show genuine affection, and I love this exchange they're about to have. But he's planning to go. He has to go because of his job, but Herbert is conflicted because he knows that his friend, Pip, needs him right now, and he needs a friend. So he says, "I'm afraid to go when you most need me." And listen to Pip's response. He says, "Herbert, I shall always need you, because I shall always love you. My need is no greater now than at another time." "You will be so lonely." "I have not leisure to think of that," said I. "You know that I am always with him to the full extent of the time allowed, and that I should be with him all day long if I could. And when I come away from him, you know that my thoughts are with him." Herbert wants to offer him a position as a clerk, and he's afraid that Pip will be lonely if he's left here alone. But Pip says, "No, I'm going to be with Magwitch. I'll have somebody to be with. I'll be fine." And then Herbert offers him the position as a clerk, and basically he says a heartfelt thank you, but he wants to think about it because he says, "Firstly, my mind was too preoccupied to be able to take in the subject clearly. Secondly, there was a vague something lingering in my thoughts that will come out very near the end of this slight narrative." And basically, Pip asks for at least 2 or 3 months to give him time to think about it, which, again, I think is showing some growth on Pip's part, that he's not just being rash and immature and rushing off, but he's actually going to think about it and make a good plan and fulfill the responsibilities that he has right now. So he's very grateful of that. Then we get a really charming scene. Wemmick reappears and invites Pip to go for a walk. And as they walk along, he says, "Oh, look, here's a church. Let's go inside." And then, "Oh, look, here's a pair of gloves. Let's put them on." And then Wemmick says, I love this. "Helloa," said Wemmick. "Here's Miss Skiffins. Let's have a wedding." And I love that he just, I don't know, it's comical, it's humorous. I find that amusing. And so basically Pip functions as his best man, as his witness in the wedding, and Wemmick and Miss Skiffins are happily married. And the aged P is there with some funny exchanges happening. And then I love this callback to near an earlier chapter when he was dining with Wemmick. It says, "It was pleasant to observe that Mrs. Wemmick no longer unwound Wemmick's arm when it adapted itself to her figure, but sat in a high-back chair against the wall, like a violoncello in its case, and submitted to be embraced as that melodious instrument might have done." So if you recall back in the dinner where Wemmick would slowly put his arm around Miss Skiffins, and then she would, knock his arm back or put his arm back, and he'd try to slowly do it again, and she'd remove his arm. She's very polite, very very proper, and no sort of monkey business going on there. But now Pip notices that act of affection was expressed, and she welcomed it. So he's very happy for his two friends, and I like that callback. And so chapter 55 ends with Wemmick asking Pip to please don't tell Jaggers about this. He said, "After what you let out the other day, Mr. Jaggers may as well not know of it. He might think my brain was softening, or something of the kind." Which is kind of sad, but kind of funny, too. He doesn't want Jaggers to know about this, because after Pip revealed the information that Wemmick had an aged parent and quite a different home life than maybe Jaggers thought, he's like, this might just be too much for Mr. Jaggers, and he'll think I've gone all soft on him. So let's just keep that between ourselves. And Pip agrees too. And hopefully this time Pip will keep his promise. So chapter 56, Magwitch continues to be in prison. He's very ill. He's on trial regardless of his injuries. He has 2 broken ribs, and one of them had wounded his lungs. And it says that he breathed with great pain and difficulty, which increased daily. It was a consequence of his hurt that he spoke so low as to be scarcely audible. Therefore, he spoke very little. But he was ever ready to listen to me, and it became the first duty of my life to say to him and read to him what I knew he ought to hear. And so Pip describes the trial of Magwitch, and he says, one of the judges, I believe, or one of the prosecutors or sheriffs, it says that among the wretched creatures before him, whom he must single out for special address, was one who almost from his infancy had been an offender against the laws, who, after repeated imprisonments and punishments, had been at length sentenced to exile for a term of years, and who, under circumstances of great violence and daring, had made his escape and been resentenced to exile for life. And then he goes on to talk about how it seemed like he was doing better and doing well, but then he came back and now is guilty of death because of his continuing crimes against what the judgment had been. And Magwitch accepts the judge's determination, and I think he reveals that he knows he's dying. He says, "My lord, I have received my sentence of death from the Almighty, but I bow to yours." Almost as if to say, you can do what you want, I'm already dying. God has already seen fit to take my life. So, and almost in a sense taking the power away from the judge, that it wouldn't have mattered what the judge decided. He was going to die anyway. Pip works desperately to try to petition on behalf of Magwitch. He writes to the Home Secretary. He even writes as far as sending a letter up to the Crown, which I'm not sure if that meant like he wrote a letter to the Queen herself, or to the Crown as in the prosecution team to say, have mercy on him. He's dying. His background. You need to understand where he came from, what drove him to this, and trying to get them to see him in a different light, which Pip sees him now in that light. He understands his past and is no longer ashamed of being seen with him. And as the chapter closes, we find Magwitch's death scene in all of its Victorian splendor. Blesses Pip. He thanks Pip for never deserting him through this process. Pip writes, "I pressed his hand in silence, for I could not forget that I had once meant to desert him. And what's the best of all," he said, "you have been more comfortable alonger me since I was under a dark cloud than when the sun shone. That's best of all." Pip has changed. He had planned to desert Magwitch. He wanted nothing to do with Magwitch. He wanted to separate himself from Magwitch, and now he's stuck with him through probably the most difficult days of Magwitch's life. Nobody had ever stayed with Magwitch through any of the trials and difficulties and even at times crime that he committed. No one has stayed by him, but they have plotted to revenge themselves on him. They have shown injustice on him. They have treated him cruelly. But Pip has stuck with him not only when he was rich, but also when he was poor and dying alone in a prison cell. And Magwitch says, that is the best of all. And what a remarkable change has come over Pip. As we're reading this to get a deeper understanding, I have a deeper understanding now of Pip's character, where when I read it as a kid, I really enjoyed that idea of, somebody giving you money and now you're rich and all your problems are solved. And I should have, finished the book. And I understand why people don't like Pip as a character, because he does go through some very awful experiences, and at a time is not a very good friend. But this redemption, or this change, really makes it worth hanging in there with him, and understanding that people make mistakes and people can change. And that's one of the lessons I'm getting out of this from Dickens. And then in a very tender scene, he wants to give Magwitch one final bit of comfort, and he talks about his child, Estella, who he loved. And he tells him this, that she lived and found powerful friends. She is living now. She is a lady and very beautiful, and I love her. So still, Pip's love for Estella continues on. And whatever you think about that, Pip is able to say these things in a way that would give Magwitch comfort in his dying moments. Did he tell him the truth? Well, yes, technically. He didn't tell him all the truth. But at this point in Magwitch's life, what would that have accomplished? To say, yeah, she's married to this awful human, and I love her, but I'll never get to be with her. And she treated me terribly most of the time I've known her. That truth would have hurt. And I think Pip does the right thing here, but that's also, something you want to be careful about is, manipulating the truth and giving only certain facts to tell a story. That can be dangerous, but I think what Pip does here is very noble, and there is no need to tell Magwitch the whole truth, but to provide him some comfort in his dying moments. And as Magwitch dies, Pip ends this chapter by reciting the prayer that he had said for Magwitch. It said, "O Lord, be merciful to him, a sinner," which nobody had been merciful to Magwitch. And so Pip's appeal is to God, and that God would have would show him mercy. And this is referencing a Bible story found in Luke chapter 18, where Jesus wants to point out the difference between the Pharisees and those who are genuinely seeking repentance. And he shows the parable of the Pharisee and the tax collector. The tax collector is someone who would be very despised in the Jewish society. But the Pharisees, Jesus's point was that they were all outward show and inwardly were very wicked and were hypocritical. And so in the story that Jesus tells, that the Pharisee, in all of his splendor and glorious garments, he stands up in the middle of the town square and prays that, God, I thank you that I am not like these other people, robbers, evildoers, adulterers, and even like this tax collector. But the tax collector is praying, and he's not even able to look up to heaven, and he's beating on his chest, and he's praying for grace and mercy and forgiveness. And he says, God, have mercy on me, a sinner. And that's a powerful story that Jesus tells about redemption and salvation, and that appeal to a higher power for help. And that's the backstory to what Pip is quoting here as he says, "Oh Lord, be merciful to him, a sinner." That yes, he's done wrong, but Lord, have mercy. And the Pharisee standing up and saying, I am perfect, and thank you for not making me like these other little people, these terrible sinners and murderers and robbers and all those people. Sorry, I'm getting sidetracked on a Bible story, but Pip prays again for mercy and perhaps does a kinder deed than anyone has ever done with Magwitch before. So that will bring us to the end of our discussion. I'm really looking forward to finishing this up with you. And I honestly, I can't believe I went through all of this. This is something I've wanted to do for such a long time. And I will just have this video vlog of my thoughts and questions about this book. And I really enjoyed that. And as always, I just want to thank you for reading along with me and helping me through this and helping me think deeper about this story. It has been wonderful. Thank you. So I'm going to just go ahead and end here. Not a whole lot of fanfare. Wait for Saturday. We'll have the rest of the video out, and we'll see how the story wraps up. There's really not a whole lot of plot lines left, but Dickens will manage to possibly write everything up in a nice, bright, shiny bow and end the story on a happy note. Or will he? Well, we'll find out. So until next time, happy reading, and take care.